Now, here's the thing that most people don't realize when they have that experience. That change you went through is literally the whole point. Welcome to the Love Your Brain podcast, the podcast designed for everyday people who are ready to hop off the negative thought hamster wheel and enjoy a less hostile environment in their own brains. Our brains are where we live our entire lives, and I'm on a mission to help people see that they have everything they need to make it a happier place to be. So join us for this episode of the Love Your Brain podcast. Let's get started. As we are transitioning from 2024 and going into 2025, everyone is talking about their goals for the new year. And although I'm also a goals person, I have been experimenting with a new approach, and this one focuses more on reflecting on growth and encouraging my own development in a liberating way, and I'm so excited to share it with you today. Now, let's start today by talking about change as it relates to the brain. Now, brains are meant to grow, change, and evolve over time, but we don't typically think about this on a daily basis, right? Like, most people aren't walking around like, wow, I feel my brain growing and changing today. Well, at least not typically. Typically, we notice it in hindsight, and sometimes I even notice people observing how their brains have changed and they're almost embarrassed by it. Now, let me explain. Have you ever been someone who believes something so wholeheartedly? Maybe it's your whole personality at one point. Maybe it was a way of eating for you. Maybe it was a sport or hobby you were obsessed with. Maybe it was a part of your spiritual journey you were on, or a place you visited that you could not stop talking about. And then maybe a few years go by, you grow, you evolve, and you look back and realize you don't think that way anymore. And maybe you even develop almost an opposing view of that thing. Sometimes this can make us feel ashamed, embarrassed, that we changed our minds about something, right? So let's revisit our example. Let's say a few years ago you were a vegan and you wholeheartedly believed everyone around you would be better off if they were vegan, if they only ate plants, that animal products were terrible, the whole bit. But here you are a few years later, you've had some different life experiences, you're now eating animal products again, and you're feeling better in your body. Sometimes that transition can feel really uncomfortable, right? Like here we are preaching one way was right, and now we believe the opposite is true. Now, here's the thing that most people don't realize when they have that experience. That change you went through is literally the whole point. You aren't meant to have one belief for your entire life. Like, what person is born thinking one way, like literally out of the womb, lives 80 years, and dies thinking the same way? That would be ridiculous. In fact, we're supposed to be having experiences in life that completely change how we see the world. What we think is great, what we think is not great, what we think of ourselves, what we think of everyone around us, it's all supposed to change over time. Now, let me tell you a bit of a funny story from my childhood. When I was younger, like early elementary school, I'm not sure how old I was, but I had this belief that when we went to bed, my mom would close the doors to the kitchen and it would clean and sanitize the whole kitchen overnight. Like the whole kitchen was almost a dishwasher and would spray the kitchen down, rinse it, dry it, and then in the morning, she would open the doors and it would be clean. I believed this wholeheartedly. But obviously now looking back, I'm like, what in the world? How did I even think that was possible? It makes me laugh so hard. I mean, as an adult, I wish that were true. I wish that we had that invention, but holy cow, my brain, I don't know how it even got there. Okay, so hopefully that gives you a little laugh, but just the same things apply for our thoughts now. It's okay to think something is completely true and then change your mind. If you wouldn't judge your younger self, don't judge your adult self. Just because you're an adult does not mean you have to have everything figured out. Life is all about figuring it out as you go along. If we look at the science behind our brains, it supports this idea as well. If you've heard anything about neural pathways or neuroplasticity, it's basically the sciencey way of explaining how our brains can change how they operate over time. As human beings, what we experience in life alters the series of reactions that happen in our brains. And we can actually take part in behaviors that create new pathways in our brain over time. One way I like to explain this is when you make a new trail. Say you're in the forest and someone is trying to make a new trail. At first, it feels weird because you're creating a new path when there wasn't one there before. It takes effort to clear all the brush, get rid of the trees, get rid of the sticks. And even after that, it takes a while to make it a worn down path. so that there aren't little stumps and things that keep popping up along the way. But over time, once it's been traveled down a cajillion times, it's almost automatic for people. They can see that path, they follow that path with ease, nothing's really popping up in the path to get in their way, and our brains react to stimuli in a very similar way. At one point in our life, there's usually a significant experience or a dedicated new habit that in turn causes a new reaction in our brains. And that happens many times over that create a lot of the behaviors that we do on a daily basis that we don't even think about. They become well worn paths in our brains. Now, in the past, these cases that got the most attention were instances where this happened in a negative way. For example, if someone experienced trauma, it would stimulate the brain in a way where every time that stimuli happened in the future, it would elicit the same response. So, for example, if a child was hit when they were younger, you might see them cower when someone would lift a hand to them, even if it was not in a threatening way. Similar to how a veteran with PTSD might respond to loud noises that reminded them of being in combat. What we know now, though, is that this can happen in the same way in our brains, but in a positive way as well. And we can help our brains to reorganize itself and create new responses to different stimuli to create positive change. Maybe on a future episode, we'll go deeper into this topic. But overall, the main point is our brains were created to grow, adapt, and change. Your brain is constantly changing in order to keep you alive and safe. So, thank you to our brains. But if our brains were meant to change over time, why does it feel so weird to change sometimes? Well, because often we connect our beliefs with a part of our identity. And when we feel like our identity is changing, it can feel unstable and it can make you feel unsure of yourself. And this is especially the case if you grew up in an environment that did not inherently change much around you. Which leads me to my next challenging part of changing your beliefs, is that often we are surrounded by people that have similar beliefs to us at any given point. For example, if you think pickleball is the best thing ever and you're playing pickleball 24/7, you're probably spending a lot of time with people who also love pickleball. Or if you're someone very involved in your church, you volunteer there, you go on Sundays, you do all the things, you're also probably spending a lot of time with people who have a similar faith because that just happens naturally. But with that being the case, when we change our beliefs, it can also affect how we interact with those around us. We might not have the same type of connections with those people as we did before, and that can feel really jarring. But let me put you at ease. You are not, in fact, your thoughts. You are not your beliefs. You are so much more. And you can be different than those around you. And in fact, over time, you will likely see that the more you grow and change, there will be people that stick with you through all those changes. And those often end up being the deepest and most fulfilling connections you will have. And hopefully, over time, you'll also build a support network of people who enjoy that whole process of growing and changing and encourage you on your journey. Now, I'm not going to sugarcoat things. I've gone through a few seasons where I have made significant changes to my beliefs that have really sent my life into what felt like a tailspin. I've even had people I cared about deeply confront me and say they did not like how I had changed. And let me tell you, that is a challenging conversation to have. This all leads me to why I created the 5 pillars of belief. I personally have struggled with both concepts. Number one, the misconception that my beliefs define me. And number two, the misconception that if I were to change my beliefs, I'd no longer have a support system. And as I've worked to challenge those concepts over time, it's made me realize my need to create a framework that actually nurtures my development over time and not just allowing me to change my beliefs, but rewarding me for flipping previous beliefs on its head. And this is how my pillars of belief concept was born. Because I do not want to live my life being in fear because maybe if I change, I'll no longer know who I am or I may no longer have a support system. I don't want fear to be a motivator for anything, to be quite honest with you. So if you're in the same boat and don't want those fears to stop you from growing, this might be a good tool for you as well. Now, the idea is at the end of each year, I write down 5 pillars of belief from the previous year. So January 1 of 2025, I sat down and wrote down my 5 pillars of belief that I held for 2024. And then next year, January 1st of 2026, I will write down the pillars of belief that I held for 2025. And these 5 pillars of belief could really be anything. I personally have certain areas of my life that I struggle to change more in, and those are the ones I focus on the most. But you could also just work from 5 categories of life that are significant for you. For example, you could write down what you believe about yourself, what you believe about others, what you believe you need to live a fulfilling life, what you believe about what happens after you die, what you believe about fueling your body or how you move your body, or what you believe about how you spend your free time. The options are endless. So you are writing down a statement that is significant for you that you believed in the previous year. And in reality, these don't have to be earth shattering statements. It's more important that it's just significant for you and that it's something that is important for you and how you live your life. Maybe for you in 2024, you believed that walking 10,000 steps a day was the best way for you to move your body. There is one of your pillars of belief. Maybe for you in 2024, you really leaned into running your own business. And one of your beliefs is being an entrepreneur is the best way for you to make money while having flexibility with your schedule. Or maybe you really focused on your kids this past year. And so your belief might be that prioritizing your children's success is the most fulfilling thing you will ever do with your life. Or maybe it's a quote you heard that really was impactful and helped you make decisions how you spent your year. There really aren't a lot of rules, but it needs to be significant for you. And honestly, it doesn't have to be all positive either. Maybe it's something about yourself that you don't like. Maybe your belief is that you're an angry person, or maybe that you're not good at something. If you don't like it, you can change it. And maybe it'll be a motivator for you in your next years to turn it on its head. Now, I probably wouldn't make all of my negative, but if there's something significant that you believe about yourself that you want to change, I say give it a whirl. So once you have your 5 pillars written down, you want to make a plan to revisit them periodically during the year. I like to do it quarterly, or maybe more frequent works better for you. The idea is you're actually shooting for change. So taking a look at those really helps keep it on the forefront of your mind. And if you feel those nudges throughout the year to try something new or to play devil's advocate and challenge your own belief, this is your periodic reminder to go for it because you know next year it could lead you down a path of a whole new belief. And you get to write it down. I almost view it like giving myself a point each time a belief gets turned on its head and I get to write it down in the next year. It's a nurturing practice of growth without too much pressure, which I love. Now, obviously, each belief isn't going to change each year, but over time, a lot of them will begin to change. And I'll be honest with you, this year I felt so incredibly proud of my list because when I look back, there were so many small steps of overcoming fears throughout the previous years that I had to overcome to get to this place where I actually believe differently. And just nurturing myself through the growth process has helped me learn to trust myself more because I realize how so many things have been birthed out of following those little nudges I feel, where my gut is telling me to try something new or explore a new idea, or even doing something that feels like it's just not me. I try it, and in the end, I see huge transformation. And for that, I'm incredibly grateful. And honestly, in a world where so much can feel out of control, this practice has helped me to see that I can control how I grow and how I change, and I can also be proud of it. I hope this tool is helpful for you, and maybe it just inspires a new idea on how you will approach your reflection of the next year or in your goal planning. So here's to growing in 2025. I hope you found something helpful here today on the Love Your Brain podcast. Maybe a laugh or a feeling of validation, or maybe just a few moments to have company while you do your laundry. Whatever you take from it, I hope you enjoyed your time and leave feeling empowered to be more you every day. Make sure you're subscribed so you don't miss out on the next episode, and leave a review. I'd love to hear what you think. Have a great one.